Okay. Let me pull up the document. Right, like always, let's start off with people talking about what they've done this week. I know Daniel and Josh have made the the end-to-end test and service controller PRs. So we can start from there. If they're on. They're not on. Okay. Keenan, do you have an update on the CSI providers?
Not this week, but I think I'll have some time actually to really work on it this coming week. So maybe next week I'll have an update.
Okay, thank you. And Nick?
Yeah, so two things. One, last week we filed a ticket with our legal team about repositories. It is just starting to go through the process. They just had their first correspondence on it, so it's being slow as usual. But I'll probably have an update on whether we are going to host the cloud provider repository or it will be owned by CNCF next week. And the other thing is I actually just started having some time to dive into the PRs that Walter has been submitting. So I was going to ask him, I guess he's not here, but I was going to ask him if he had some time this week, maybe to meet with me. So I'll ping him directly for that, just to sort of talk through them so I can catch up and help out wherever I can.
Cool.
Excellent. I had a question about the repos thing. So I was under the impression that we're going to go ahead and go with repos in the Kubernetes org globally, or is it sort of opt-in, or how are we doing that?
That was my major accomplishment this week, was getting Caleb to come to this meeting.
And I think that probably it's TBD. I think the easiest thing, since none of the vendors seem to have any interest in owning the code themselves, would be to make new repositories in the Kubernetes organization. So you can take advantage of all the automation that's already there. And
that's what I was thinking of as well. And also the fact that just from an architectural standpoint, that's something that's a known pattern for things that, or a carrot for people who are extracting code out. So that would be a good example of that whole pattern working too.
Right.
Yes. So that's what my perception was last week. But after speaking with my team, I think there was some interest in putting the code under Amazon's GitHub organization. If I think if the community feels like that's, I don't know, bad in some way, then I'll bring that back and we can discuss it further. So I personally don't care either way. There's some folks on my team that thought it would be a good thing for Amazon to own. And so we continued with the tickets that were essentially asking legal if there's any issues with it. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so maybe we can sync up offline, but one pattern that is used in similar projects at Google sometimes is to mirror and have a sync and rebase automation in an internally hosted repo. Some of the use cases that come up are like critical security patches that expose some issue in your data center that you don't want to commit to open source now until it's mitigated. And so for reasons like that, sometimes it's useful to set up tooling for a mirror internally. But our hope is that others will continue to contribute to the GCP cloud provider, even across teams at Google. Sometimes it's hard for people to find some of these internal repositories, and folks find bugs and issues and submit PRs to the open source community through the open source project. So I think for this working group, our default will be other repositories in the Kubernetes org. And that'll be a first step, even if you guys make a different decision going forward. I think that doesn't change the current ownership or exposure or publicity of what's existing today. So I can't see how that would be an issue. It's just moving it within the same organization and entity. So I think we should go ahead with that. And then I think what may end up being a long discussion with lots of people who don't quite understand what's going on your side, just from experience on our side. This is not any kind of commentary other than lawyers take a long time to talk.
Yep. Azure, same deal.
So I think Caleb is going to help drive, like, the structure has the rights to create the new repositories and can help us all move that code there over time. And so that's why he's specifically at this meeting and will continue to show up and participate here. Yay!
Okay, just a point of clarification really quick. So the repository wouldn't be, it seemed like you were saying it would be internal and not public. It would be a public repository under the Amazon organization GitHub versus CNCF. But yeah, I don't think that there's a super strong like feeling that we need that. So if it's much preferred to be under CNCF, I think we could probably do that as well.
I would say oh, sorry, Caleb.
Oh, no worries, Jace. I was just going to suggest that it will be certainly more expedient to create a repository in the existing Kubernetes org, since the code is today owned by the CNCF, and your legal team will have to work that out with the foundation about transferring it out of the Kubernetes org.
Yeah, that I think that's fine. Let's start with that, and then if people on my team or whoever decides that we want it, then we'll bring that up when it comes time.
Yeah, and Nick, if you need more information just on what are the benefits of staying there, there's a lot of the bots and automation and process is already built into the Kubernetes org, and it would likely be challenging to recreate that, and maintaining consistency is likely not possible.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'll bring that up with my team.
The owner's mechanism also that we have today should give your team the kind of control they're looking for in terms of who can approve changes to the repository.
Yeah, so happy to have more conversation if there's more information on what is the motivation. Maybe there's other information that would help address the motivation without making that change.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, Jace, did you want to talk about what's going on with CCM and Azure?
Yeah, so I talked to the team this morning in the SIG Azure meeting, and we have a private repo that we're basically gonna, I think, move over to the repo when it's created. So we're just basically on hold until we get the Kubernetes org repo in place. And it looks like we're going to have some contract resources around doing some of the EDE test creations and getting those results into test grid and making this all a first-class citizen. So I'm super thrilled that Microsoft is investing in actually doing this the right way. So that is good, and it bodes well for this project being successful. So yay, Microsoft.
and nicely done, Jace. I imagine there was some legwork on that one.
No, they always just do magic things, and magic things happen. So just like at Google.
That's right.
There's magic. So looking good. I'm super excited to see that when I load test grid and there's some EDE testing results coming up there. That'll make me super, super happy. That's all I got.
That's great to hear. Jago, do you have anything to add about Google?
Walter is here, so maybe.
Oh, cool. Hey, Walter.
Here I was trying to hide. The biggest thing is I got the rather, extensive context signature change for cloud provider out as a PR. I put it in the Slack channel, so it would be great if people could take a look at that. Obviously, if that goes in, that there's going to be a slew of PRs that are going to need to follow to actually implement that sort of functionality as needed in each of the cloud providers.
Okay.
And one thing, Walter, before you arrived, Nick was saying that Nick Turner mentioned that he was starting to take a look at the PRs that you've been submitting, and he would love to have a meeting at some point this week just to get caught up and ask some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. My calendar's pretty free, so yeah, let's get a meeting going.
Cool. I'll ping you on Slack. Thanks.
Yep.
Perfect. So one question I had, Jago, was do we have a plan for what we're going to do about other cloud providers, the ones that don't exist in Tree today?
Yes, that's part of the scope of what Caleb is taking on to try and figure that out. My hope is that we just have the exact same pattern for all cloud providers. Again, I really want to avoid the situation where there are two classes of cloud providers. That's a major focus of this whole effort, is making sure that doesn't persist forever into the future. And then there's one other thing that we talked about that is escaping me now. If it comes, I will. The repositories and the posting test results back test grid and those pieces, I think Mitra is on primarily, but maybe Caleb will get pulled into some.
Okay, so what happens if say DigitalOcean wants to add its CCM? Would it create a new would it talk to CNCF, get a new repository in the Kubernetes org, and then add their code in there?
Yes.
Okay.
So I imagine they're already developing it somewhere, but it would be the exact same process as Google or Amazon or Microsoft moving out of Tree. It's just create a new repo and then move the code to that new repo.
I don't know that that's true, because there's kind of a crackdown on getting things in the org. So I don't know if that's
with the caveat that there is already a process for contributing code to the CNCF and getting into that organization, not into Kubernetes repository, which I think is a more challenging discussion.
One question I have is, how would you qualify something as a cloud provider and not? Because, I mean, just to get Kubernetes working on one certain specific flavor of, say, OpenStack, I could have my own cloud provider implementation. I mean, my worry is, will we end up with a lot of repositories that are not really CCMs, but want to be CCMs?
I think we're going to hand waves around some conformance stuff.
So part of the effort that's going on right now is to create end-to-end tests for exercising the cloud provider interfaces. At some point, we have talked in the conformance working group about profiles, and one of the profiles we've discussed is related to cloud provider-y things. I think it's critical that a Raspberry Pi can be conformant to Kubernetes, but there is some optional functionality like infinite disk space and things that just don't apply to those bare metal deployments. So I think eventually, say end of 2018, we'll get through conversations and figure out a path for these profiles. But that hasn't been the biggest fish to fry in that working group so far. It's mostly just trying to get what is the required API to surface to be conformant. Whether there are kind of some concept of virtual cloud providers, if it's useful, I don't have a gut reaction that that's a bad thing. So if it's useful to create that, maybe that makes sense. But ideally what we want is other repositories in the Kubernetes organization that host these cloud providers that have the part of the code that's different from core. And we want to maintain as much of the common functionality in core as possible to avoid both fragmentation and the need for all of us to fix a bug that someone else already fixed. That is just makes me feel bad as a person if that's the outcome of all of this. So we should avoid that.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, my question came from a point where I was trying to understand what really qualifies it, but the conformance profile that you talked about made sense. So, I mean, it sounds like everything's on track. We have the CSI effort going on one side, we have the CCM effort going on the other, and Walter's helping with cleaning up the code. And then end-to-end tests are being done by Danielle, and who's not here on the call today, and also Joshua from Oracle. So it's all good. We can
to circle back to Jace's point that there's hesitation to accept new code into the Kubernetes organization. I think that this is a case where this effort's been underway for a while, so I'll take as an action item to do some legwork and socialize the idea that we need a place for cloud providers to put code, that there's a compelling argument to be made that should be in Kubernetes org.
Yeah, we had that discussion at SIG Architecture last time, and Brian Grant was relatively explicit about saying that there was an exception around the existing entry providers moving to in-org repos. So I don't know if that meant that he was saying that others shouldn't from an architectural standpoint or a management standpoint, or if it was just, I don't know. So it would be good probably just to ask him, and we could do it in a PM or something, just like what's his thought on it, because as somebody who's active in the architectural realm, I think that he would have strong opinions on it, and I would love to know what those are.
Okay. I will talk to him and come back next week with a update.
Cool. Fantastic.
I think the earlier point, though, is a good one. I think we do need to be able to distinguish between what is a proper cloud provider and what is just a mechanism for bringing up a particular, flavor of Kubernetes, which is not a cloud provider. Whether that is, some sort of odd hybrid or, the Raspberry Pi example, or, someone who wants to do something on top of AWS, right? It's not clear to me that someone who wants to run something on AWS is really a cloud provider. AWS is still a cloud provider.
I guess it's not clear to me without examples what we mean by that. The cloud provider bits are the load balancers and volumes and things that differ between the cloud providers to present a consistent interface to end users.
And maybe that's how we draw the line. But I think, having an entry criteria to say, look, this is what we expect to be true before we're going to give you one of these, CNCF repos for cloud provider work.
I think this is something we should probably avoid future-proofing. I think we're just going to run into these things, and those things will sort themselves out. And, the other thing is it's not just the cloud provider. There's all sorts of things around volumes and other stuff that are going to be – this is just a big mess, and we're going to probably have to do it by case in order to do this in any same way.
I buy that. On the other hand, even if we don't want to make it like, here are the hard rules, if we at least provide guidance, I think, otherwise, we don't want to have the appearance of just arbitrary decision.
Yeah, well, I think that's what I was saying, or maybe Brian was also saying about, there's a clear line of decision around, if you're taking something out of tree or in tree and you're making it out of tree, then that's a default. Your reward for that is you get all the optimizations that come with being in the Kubernetes org, versus somebody who is like a mom and pop shop that's spinning up some sort of new, mycloud.com, and they want to have something in tree just for the clout of doing that, or not in tree, but in org, then that's the sort of thing that we need to protect against, is there being some sort of non-functional benefit of being in the org. We don't want to grant clout. We want to grant people the ability to do the job and serve the community.
I like the line you drew. I think that makes perfect sense. It should be around functionality versus other intangible benefits. Yeah, maybe we should document that and then we can deal with it on a case by case basis. That becomes the guidance that Walter was asking about.
Yeah.
We do have similar precedents in the client realm. In order to have a new Kubernetes client, for example, there have to be multiple maintainers and there has to be some sort of commitment. I think that part of it is important too. We don't want that responsibility to end up falling to the broader Kubernetes community.
Right. Right. We should document all this. For now, we have this recording. Okay. Sounds good.
I put a to-do in the agenda for this, so we can at least have it as something we're tracking if we get time and cycles to do that.
Sounds great.
Okay. That's it for this week. Next week, hopefully we'll see a good set of end-to-end tests. We have end-to-end tests for node controller now. I'm working on end-to-end tests for service controller. I was waiting for the pull request from Oracle to make the service controller fix this before I start writing it. Next week I'll have a PR. We'll go from there.
That was great.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Thanks,
All right.
Sid.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Good
Thank you.
discussion.
Okay, everyone. See you all next week.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.